Maybe first off, if you don't know me, if you're not familiar with me, my name is Duffield, and mainly how I approach things is I'm an interactive experience artist and designer. So a lot of the way well, most of my work is about thinking about interactivity in mind. Even the way I use Macs and have learned it always kind of factors this in. As Chloe mentioned, I'm a Mac certified trainer, but generally this means I play with audio, video, electronics. I like things interactive. I like spaces. I like objects that react to people. I like playing with LEDs. I like things kind of gamey. So that's kind of how, again, I approach all this. So my main thing and why I'm talking about today and what really got me interested in Rainbow, other than, okay, there's many reasons why I would be interested in Rainbow, but the thing that I find I'm especially interested is starting to think about how you could export Rainbow and Max code onto standalone hardware, specifically like small embedded things like the Raspberry Pi. So my main first experiment was to build a standalone sampler on a Raspberry Pi, because there's a lot of cool stuff you could do with that. So I'm going to show you a little video demo. You'll see plenty of wires because it's proto phase. So I'll play that. If anyone has one moment, I'm going to make sure also I'm sharing audio because Zoom does that sometimes. Awesome. Cool. So hopefully you can hear this, and here we go. And sorry, one more thing. So what I did here is I made a Raspberry Pi sampler, but what you could actually do is hook up analog sensors to it. So in this case, I hooked up a stretch sensor, just in case that's not clear by this video. Stretch sensor. Meow, 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 meow. Meow, 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 meow. Meow, 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 meow. Cool. So that was the video the video demo. Yeah, so kind of going, come on. Whoops. Yeah, don't mind me. Sorry, I had a little slide issue here. Here, yeah, there we go. So if you're not familiar with the Raspberry Pi and like how you would make something like this, I'm using the Raspberry Pi 4, and it's essentially a tiny Linux computer. And now to get this working, now you can use Rainbow with a Raspberry Pi, but to integrate it with hardware, you do need a bit of extra knowledge and usage of Python. And this was actually one of my first main Raspberry Pi projects, and Rainbow kind of led into it, which I also think is pretty cool. So, you know, what's really also cool about this is with the Raspberry Pi and it being a tiny computer. Now I'm doing this, you know, thing where I'm making custom electronics with it, but you could just as easily use it as a tiny computer, hooking up like a MIDI keyboard or anything like this. So I really like the idea that you can have a portable instrument. And I think that opens up a lot of really cool options for both installation and performance. So yeah, so where this is, there's a lot of different ways we could even interpret this once we start to think about, we have, you know, tiny hardware with Macs on it. There's a really cool Rainbow tutorial. People are building their own guitar, multi-effects guitar pedals, right? There's ways you could, again, network things. You could have something that's audio reactive or generative and connected to the internet. I think that opens up a lot of $20 Pi plus Rainbow. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat there. Yeah, so like it's pretty, so there's a lot of different ways you can kind of approach this. So one thing that is important to kind of note is you might want to think, like with the Raspberry Pi, you can hook up different audio interfaces. So one very popular one, maybe you have one, maybe you've seen it, is the Behringer one. So again, you do need some external hardware, but um, there's other ways you could use just like one's custom for the Pi. For my specific setup, what I really wanted to do was to make everything as streamlined as possible. So this one's really cool. It's called the ReSpeaker USB microphone array, and it's USB connected. It has just a, kind of line out, but it also has a built-in microphone and audio output all in one unit. And it's about the size of a hockey puck, maybe, if you want to think about that as a reference. So what's really cool about this too is it actually has voice activation built in. It can detect the direction things are coming in. And these are even other things you can access via Python and theoretically hook into Rainbow. So again, might seem like a bit of a meander here, but it's there's a lot of flexibility once we start to think about just tiny computers that we have as instruments. The other thing, to make this little portable setup that you saw in the video, you could just use any typical kind of portable speakers, right? So really where this gets really cool, I think, is thinking even about distributed instruments or just ways of keeping everything very condensed. So if you want a kind of overview of what this even workflow looks like, obviously we have Max and Rainbow. And maybe what I'll do quickly is, if you want to know what the Rainbow side looks like and what the Max side looks like, this is essentially the code. And it's, if you are familiar with Max, it's not actually super complicated, right? There's a lot of, I think, objects that you might be familiar with if you're used to Max, like record, right? We have groove. And a lot of it is just about thinking about how to map it and do these little tweaks from Max into Rainbow. And then when we put it to the Pi or export it to the Pi, we could that's when we kind of get a bit into Python to hook up some of the sensors. But the actual workflow and the way of prototyping is a lot nicer than if you've tried to do something like this with just straight up, I'll say, vanilla Python or C++ on a device like that. And it's really great for troubleshooting if, again, you're newer to this whole kind of way and workflow. Other even cool things is you could code this all headless, meaning Max and Rainbow can see the Pi on a network once you have it set up. So again, a lot of really cool things and tips and tricks for diagnosing. So develop on Rainbow with the back, export it to the Pi. We have the electronics, which we hook up through the general purpose in-out pins. And then essentially that just gets output to this USB mic, this thing I showed here, okay. Windows base, maybe I'll read the chat after. So, and I just wanted to say, this was my first Python main introduction. I've used it a bit, but I found through some of the tutorials that Rainbow and Max provides, again, there were definitely hurdles, but overall, the fact that you could do this and do this fairly quickly is, I found very kind of cool and impressive. But if you look at Python, this is generally what it looks like. So, there is, again, that learning curve. And this is also a topic I'm hoping to discuss and do some workshops on in the future. So hopefully we can all build some stuff together. Yeah, so I'm going to be conscious of time because I might be going on and there's other amazing presenters. But the thing I really want to kind of nail home is I use a stretch sensor, but technically you could hook up any button. You could hook up a variety of sensors, whether it be knobs. You could have water sensors. Oh, I do have 5 minutes. Thank you. I thought I was just, jabbering there. Awesome. Okay, so maybe I'll go back then. Okay, I'm going to rewind here. So to get something like this working, you do actually need to install some external libraries. So to get the sensors and the hardware communicating to Python to Rainbow, you need to have some familiarity with OSC. Maybe if you used OSC in other applications, and the way to think about that is it's kind of like a local network or kind of glue between applications where we can send messages. That's mostly what the Python is doing, and what we're doing, or how we're using Python on the Pi, I should say. And the other one is the tutorials and kind of references through Rainbow and Max. We're using the GPIO pins, which stands for general purpose in-out. So that is on the electronics hardware side, what is kind of getting, our knobs and switches and transmitting it to Rainbow so we can use it and map it. And the one thing I think that's extremely important is I would not have been able to do this without Sam Wolk and his wonderful tutorials with Rainbow. So I just want to make sure that I give credit where it's due. And so again, to build this, what did I need? Max 8 Rainbow, the Pi, hardware, speaker. I mean, in this one, I had the conductive rubber, which is the stretch sensor. The one thing about Pi, if you're used to Arduino, is that you do need the MCP 3008 chip. And what that does is that allows you to connect analog sensors to the Pi, okay? So again, this is kind of the basic materials you would need for this type of setup, but there's a lot of different ways you could approach and build your own kind of custom hardware and instruments. So yeah, and just, one thing that I hope maybe gets some of you inspired is I use the stretch sensor. We could use things like proximity sensors, joysticks. I like gaming, right? So there's a lot of fun that you can have with that. Light, right? You can sense light in a room. Maybe you have a light reactive instrument or multiple instruments. Formaldehyde sensor. Anyone know what formaldehyde would be used for usually? I've only actually seen it when I worked in anatomy labs. But if for some reason you had a use for that as an instrument, all the power to you. And another thing that I think is really important to kind of think about is going back a decade ago, before Rainbow, one of my first interactive projects was collaboration with my creative collaborator, Danielle Hopkins. Was we designed this 50 speaker, 6 channels of interactive audio. And what do you approach the sculpture from different sides, different kind of generative synthesis sounds would happen, responding to users. So back then, this was actually an Arduino. We had long cables going across the room. This was actually one of the first, you learn over time, right? So this is a decade ago, and it was actually one of my first experiments with Max for Live, okay? But if I were to redesign this now, knowing what you could do with a Pi or similar hardware, theoretically, all that cable, all the computer, all the things could just be embedded right in the sculpture to make something kind of generative. So yeah, I guess that's my spiel for today. But thank you, and I'm happy to chat with you all in the breakout room. If you want to learn more about just hardware, generative, with Rainbow, anything of that sort. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Kyle. And yeah, it's really awesome how we can like de-embed these instruments from computers. I work a lot with microcontrollers and sensors and whatnot, but being able to like run my set from a device this big, pretty awesome. So yeah, thank you so much for that. And as mentioned in the chat, there's a lot of questions for the breakout rooms. After these presentations, we're going to open up 3 breakout rooms for attendees to come in, and then we can talk through things and workshop together with each presenter. So if you have any questions, that's a really good time for that. And yes, also the presentation is going to be coming up on YouTube. That's why we're recording. The breakout rooms will also not be recorded, so they're more of a private space to interact. So yeah, thanks again so much, Kyle. That was really awesome and informative. And I love Keyboard Cat's custom toy. So up next we have Zeynep who's going to be sharing how she used Rainbow's VST export for compositional ideas and how like she's interpreted those workflow differences of switching from Max to Rainbow as like good differences. And yes, if you want to go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Well, my name is Zeynep Özcan. I teach at the Performing Arts Technology Department here at Ann Arbor, University of Michigan. I'm also faculty director of Girls in Music Technology Summer Camp there. It's a 2-week long summer camp. And I'm also electronic music composer and academic. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about what my creative practice is in general, so that it can make sense how I use Ableton for for compositional purposes in general. And so my creative practice lies at the intersection of music and technology, where I explore biologically inspired musical creativity, interactive, immersive, and generative environments. Under the umbrella, let's say again, for me, is just the reason is to compose electronic music, regardless of the medium I'm using. So it can be Ableton, it can be Max, it can be processing, it can be a sound installation, generative system that I use the data to sonify. But in the end, it's just an electronic music for me. And I teach these courses at the Performing Arts Department as well. Electronic music production, we work with Ableton in general in the class. Creative coding for music, I teach processing and Max, and 101 freshman seminar intermediates and GMAT. Yeah, as I said, these are like some of the keywords that I am working on. If I, let's say, have a project and if I create something, I use some of them, but mainly my bio-inspired creativity, let's say. And if you were here before during my first presentation around September 2021, I introduced 2 of my works, Proprius and a sequel of Proprius, Disseminate. I'm not going to talk about them today, but I used Rainbow to convert the organisms in this Proprius, and just little did I know that I was designing a MIDI instrument. For some reason, I was not thinking that way when I was, converting my patch, and it created it's very interesting, different results for me. But shortly, Proprius is it's an autonomous interactive sound environment where the sonification of animal behavior within an ecological simulation is used to create an interactive augmented reality music composition. And let me show you the video while I speak. So it's an oral augmented reality. So if you're in this system as an audience, you're just gonna hear it. That's why I have this image. You're not gonna see that, let's say, 90s images in general, but these are the organisms, and they follow a bunch of different basic rules to survive. So if they're hungry, they're gonna find food. They have different behaviors, and all these behaviors, of course, change the data and the attributes as a result. Since they're all synthesizers inside Max, we're just going to hear a composition or different sounds in general. And the whole implementation of these behaviors and the attributes are based on the idea of creating different forms, different gestures, and maybe even two parts of a composition. That's why I have part A and part B here, because during part B we have predators. As a result, organisms are trying to run away so that they don't die. Eventually we have, different music in the work. I have some.
Excuse me. I don't know if you're sharing sound or.
Oh, I'm not.
This is just. Okay, cool.
Oh, though I will. Maybe let me check. Yeah, I'm sharing some, but this is just a video.
Thanks so much. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, it's fine. If you're interested in how it sounds, like, you can just check my website and go to, my SoundCloud link, or I have a bunch of articles about these projects as well, so you can check them if you want to know about the implementations or some of the creative decisions. The sequel let's see, is Disseminate. Whoops, no, Disseminate is basically I converted the whole system so that I can perform instead of, putting the audience in the system and make it a generative interactive work. I guess it's still generative interactive, but I am performing it. So since I created the system, I thought, oh, if I just, move my mouse and do weird stuff with these organisms, I could actually generate very weird sounds that I did not think about for Proprius. And moving on to the final version, which is RNBO. So I basically picked up all of these organisms and converted them as if they were instruments. But like I said, I didn't think about the actual scaling when it comes to, playing an instrument with MIDI because of the data mapping I was using. Nothing was scaled, so I didn't have any harmonic situation. I mean, I did have for the trees, but in general, this system is not generating a very traditionally musical scaled music in general. It is now because of the RNBO. But yeah, that's why I'm calling it an LI, because it's not a generative interactive system anymore. I'm just basically converted all of these organisms as if, not that as they are going to be, instruments. I pick the parameters. I try to stay true to the whole idea. So for example, if you just open these instruments as a plugin, you'll see an energy knob and health knob and, sick knob, so that maybe it may not make sense first, but it's just, for example, if you lower the sickness of the animal, you'll hear less volume and longer envelope, because it's just that specific animal is about to die. Let's see, maybe let me demonstrate. So I even used session view, which I don't normally use, but yeah, so as you can see, it's just, okay, let me remove those because I'm not going to use them. So these are all of the instruments: cats, plants, birds, insects. So I did not want to do more than this, so that, I was wondering how is it going to sound without adding another instrument. And then I just created some kind of clips based on how they sound. Let's see. Wait a minute. I barely can hear it. Can you hear it?
It's definitely a little quiet.
Yeah. Okay, anyways, I don't want to change though. Let's find something that can make it louder. So for example, this can never happen in my previous system, like Proprius was disseminate because of this scale. But anyways, and I started, playing with the system, and then I realized, why not? Nobody's stopping me. Add a bunch of different cool effects that I like, and let's see how it sounds. And the workflow completely changed for me, because I didn't need to think about the let's say technicalities. For instance, if you're working with Max, and then if you hear something you like, it's just passes, even though you try to realize, create it again and open Ableton and to get the output and connect it to Ableton. Now I have the instrument and I can immediately, record it and manipulate and maybe convert the MIDI to audio, and who knows, what's going to happen. So I recorded this. I'm going to play that. Let's see. Yay. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that composition with us. And Crystal is going to speak about like showing us some experiments. They've been working on translating their audio effects patches into personalized plugins through Rainbow, which is actually, this sort of sets us up here to take a look inside some of those patches. And yeah, Crystal is based in Portland, Oregon. And I'm really excited they could be here at 8 in the morning to present with us today. So yeah, thanks everyone so far, and so excited for the breakout rooms after this.
Hi everyone. Thanks for being here and for having me. It's so good to see all of your faces. And thanks Kyle and Zeynep for your amazing demos so far. And also thanks to Kyle, whose tutorials really helped get me going with Rainbow among some of the others that exist too. So it's amazing. I love the community and how people share their knowledge within Max. I really appreciate that. And that's kind of been my kind of goal so far working with Rainbow. I'm a sorry, my voice always is like almost gone by the end of the week from teaching. So bear with me on that. But I am an electronic music producer as well. So I perform primarily with Ableton, but I also do a lot of sound design in Max. I do a lot of installation work that is run off of Max. I do a lot of spatial audio work, so I use Max for that. And then I've done a lot of interactive installation pieces with microcontrollers as well. So I'm really excited about the potential of using Rainbow with microcontrollers and Raspberry Pi. So I'm excited to dive into that. I teach at Portland Community College. They have a Sonic Arts program and a creative coding program. I teach within both. So I do teach Max there. I teach a series of 2 classes in Max, but I also teach composition and Ableton and then some critical theory courses as well. And then outside of that, I have a collective called Whatever Space in Portland. And we teach outside of the academic institutions, sliding scale creative coding workshops that cover a large range of things. I'll show you just briefly my website, very colorful website. But here you can find a lot of my past projects. This is my most recent spatial audio installation. This was a generative composition. I also work a lot with bio data and static data as well, of like climate change data and things like that within my pieces. And then I'm also interested in adaptive instruments. This is a paper that I wrote based on a project I did making adaptive instruments for artists with disabilities at NEAM, and various other installation work, Whatever Space. So you can find out more about me there. But within Rainbow, what I have been working on, as Chloe said, is translating audio effects into VSTs. And part of the reason why I'm starting there is because of my students. So I have entry-level Max students right now. And that's one thing that I thought would be a good introduction for them with Rainbow, is to translate some of our audio effects that we've built into Rainbow. And then I have composition students as well who do not have necessarily Max experience. They also don't all have access to the same DAW, right? So these students are working with a bunch of different softwares. So I thought it would be a good idea for me to be able to make some VSTs that all of them would be able to use. So I'm really excited about that aspect of Rainbow, that I could make something and send it out and all of my students could access it on whatever DAW that they might be working with. And next term, we're working on field recording based pieces and trying to use the base of field recordings to create our compositions. So the first effect that I wanted to show you guys was based on this granulator object in Rainbow that I found through the packages. And I'll pull that up now. Let me share screen, make sure I get the sound right and everything. Okay. So this is the max side of things. And then within here, we have the rainbow side of things. So I found this granulator object, which I thought was pretty cool. And I decided to try to turn this into a plugin. So it's already got a bunch of inlets for some fun ways to control audio that's passing through. So we can adjust the start time and samples, the grain length, playback rate, pan position, buffer offset. And I've made parameters for a lot of these things. So params are, a lot of you might know if you've started to dive in, are ways that we can control from the VST side any of these parameters within Rainbow. So I've made parameters to control all of these things. One thing that I realized in setting up a VST is that it actually is pretty important the order that you set these parameters in, just for being able to play it in an intuitive way. So I was happy to be able to find that I could actually order these when they come out as a VST by putting this order attribute in the parameter. But what this basically does is this allows me to record audio up to 4 seconds and then pass it through this granulator and run the effects on it. And so I've had a lot of fun with this, just kind of in a sound design way, using field recordings and passing it through. And I've also been able to just kind of use it as my main compositional element because I have a dry and wet. I can introduce samples, record them before you hear them, and then keep passing them through the effect. So I have exported this as a VST, and I will show you here in Ableton. I just have a few samples here, and I'll drop this in. Another cool thing I enjoy about the VSTs is the ability to set some presets within it as well. That's something that I know my students will appreciate when I make VSTs for them to use in class, is some ideas for getting started. So I have an initial preset here, and let me know if you can hear this.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, and then I made a way to clear the buffer as well, because I realized I could just build up forever and it could get kind of obnoxious. So that was the first effect that I built out using that granulator object. Is just so much fun and wasn't in Max. So it's fun to see these different objects that exist in Rainbow. And then I created as well just like a basic vibrato delay here. I don't think I set a preset for this one yet, but let's see if I can hear this one. Okay, I might be having an issue with that one. So I'll leave it there. But if I figure it out, I'll show you guys in the breakout room what's going on with the audio with that one. But happy to answer more in-depth questions and show you deeper into either of those patches. Oh, thank you. Granulator was on. But happy to show more with each of those in the breakout rooms. Thank you guys.
Yeah, if you wanted to try again, now that there's the answer, then your vibrato could be in the recording, but also we're good to move on if you want to move on. Sorry, I think you're muted, but yeah, thanks so much to everybody. I feel like this was such a nice flow of how like scratching the surface of how Rainbow is useful, and we didn't even cover web audio exports. I've been able to do some stuff with the VST, and then maybe doing a little bit of hacking and getting it to work in Unity. There's kind of limitless potential. I feel like this is a really good way to start to think about that. And I'm gonna stop the recording